Despite struggling on offense, Iowa continues to exceed expectations under Kirk Ferentz. The Hawkeyes went 8-5 last year for their 9th straight season of at least 8 wins, if you exclude that COVID season when they went 6-2. But now, entering 2025, they have massive questions on both sides of the ball and a much tougher schedule than they usually have, making myself and many others wonder, can the streak of at least 8 wins continue, or will it finally come to an end? Well, let's start breaking it down for you right now. We take a look at the offense for Iowa. That has been the bone of contention for the fan base and for the team for many, many years, right? But they saw a massive upgrade last year, going from 15.4 points per game in 2023 to 27.7 points per game in 2024. So in a span of 1 year, they increased their points per game by 12.3 points per game. Despite that, they still only averaged 132 passing yards per game, one of the worst passing attacks in the entire country. They're hoping that changes this year with a new transfer quarterback from South Dakota State, Mark Gronowski, who in his 5-year career with the Jackrabbits threw for over 10,000 yards, won back-to-back national championships, and went 49-6 as a starter. Unbelievable track record during his time at South Dakota State. So they've got an experienced quarterback. Guy has a lot of talent, who's got a great arm. The biggest thing they've got to hope for him is consistency, and they've got to hope he stays healthy. Has battles and injuries throughout his career. If he goes down, Iowa does not really have a capable backup that can lead them to many victories. So the health of their quarterback is huge. They do lose their star running back, Caleb Johnson, rushed for over 1,500 yards and 21 touchdowns last year. That's going to be a huge hole they've got to fill. Kamari Moulton's going to do his best to do so. Averaged 5.6 yards per carry last year. And their leading wide receiver, Jacob Gill, does return alongside a always solid offensive line. Iowa showed improvement offensively last year. They're hoping they can do even more so in 2025. Defensively, they're always strong, right? 5 starters are back after allowing to 17.8 points per game, only 318 yards per game. Phil Parker, as we know, is one of the best defensive minds in the entire game of college football. They do lose, though, their top 4 tacklers from last year. That's a huge blow. They're not nearly as experienced on defense as they were just a year ago. The defensive line, it looks good. Ethan Herkett is back, 6.5 sacks in 2024. Aaron Graves is back, 6 sacks in 2024. So a lot of guys up front that can create pressure on the quarterback. So I love their defensive line. The secondary actually looks pretty solid too. Deshaun Lee's back. Xavier Wankpa's back. They've got a solid secondary. But the linebacking core is probably the area with the biggest question. When you lose guys like Jay Higgins and Nick Jackson, who were the top 2 tacklers from last year, that's some major holes to fill. And yes, Iowa's got talent, and yes, Phil Parker's going to get the most out of this defense, but losing those top 2 guys, the leaders and the anchor of your defense, huge hole to fill. It's going to be very interesting to see how they do it. Iowa, going into this year, you take a look at their schedule, has, I think, a more difficult schedule than they typically have, right? The Big Ten, with it expanding, does not have divisions anymore, as we know. We did know back in the past the Big Ten West was typically very weak as compared to the East with teams like Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, and guys like that. But you look now, of course, they're going to play Iowa State in a Cy-Hawk game. You've got Indiana, who made the playoff last year, Penn State, who made the playoff last year, Oregon made the playoff last year. Yes, they do get to avoid Ohio State. I guess that's a good thing, but still a very, very difficult slate across the board. This is a team, guys, that has won 24 games in the last 3 years against FBS opponents, but only 14 of those 24 wins were against teams that finished with a losing record. And the teams that they did beat that finished with a winning record were just mediocre. Teams that finished maybe 7-6. 1 year Purdue, they beat them, they went 8-6. They weren't really beating elite teams. So it makes you wonder how Iowa's going to fare this year. Now they're facing a schedule that features 8 teams that finished last year with a winning record. A lot of questions there. Let's go ahead and get into it. Albany, they're going to win that 1-0, and then they're going to play Iowa State. Last year they blew it, right? They should have beaten the Cyclones. They should have beaten them. They were up 13-0. They were up 19-7 with under 5 minutes remaining in the third quarter. They were up 19-17 with 33 seconds left. Iowa State was on their own 22-yard line. All you had to do was get a couple stops, and they didn't. They allowed a massive 30-yard pass play with about 24 seconds remaining. Iowa State kicked the game-winning 54-yard field goal to pull off the upset at Kinnick Stadium, I should add. So now you're going to Ames, and now you're going to lose again. Iowa State Lots of talent coming back from last year, especially on offense. I think the Cyclones own the edge actually in every aspect of this game. They've got the edge offensively, they've got the edge defensively, and they've got the edge with home field advantage, even though the Iowa faithful will be showing up per usual. So another great matchup, another fairly low-scoring matchup I would expect per usual between these two squads, but I think Iowa State gets the best of Iowa again. The Hawkeyes drop to 1-1. They'll cruise past UMass, they're 2-1, then they go on the road to Rutgers in what I believe is a true toss-up game. Iowa typically plays very well against Rutgers, as we've seen in years past, but I have some faith in the Scarlet Knights this year. Tough schedule, so they might not, I think it's going to be a team that's much better than their record shows, but this is arguably Greg Schiano's best team that he's had at Rutgers since he returned to the program just a few years ago. The defense has 7 starters back, veteran quarterback in Ethan Kaliak-Manis, who hopefully will improve as a passer again this year. A better core of wide receivers, I would say, than he had last year. Give me Rutgers to win this game. And I know Iowa fans will hate me for that. I know they'll maybe strongly disagree with that. But I think this Rutgers team has what it takes to finally get over that hump. In years past, some of their biggest issues has been the offense. Last year took a major step forward on offense. I think they do so again this year. As Iowa continues to work out some of their issues offensively, some of the key holes they've had to fill, Rutgers, with a more veteran squad, takes advantage of it. The Hawkeyes are 2-2 heading into a big home game against Indiana. Huge home game against Indiana. Team that surprised us all last year, winning 11 games, made the college football playoff. But here's the thing. Look at the schedule real quick. They've got a lot of home games Iowa does against some elite opponents. They get to host Indiana, host Penn State, host Oregon. So some elite teams against playoff teams from last year have to come to Kinnick Stadium. Are we going to see some Kinnick magic this year? I'll tell you, I believe Iowa wins at least one of those games. They pull off the upset, if you will, over at least one of those teams. And at least one of them will be Indiana. This will be Indiana's toughest test they've seen, really. I know they get to play Illinois a little bit earlier, too, but all those games at the beginning of the year at home for the Hoosiers. So you're going to be going from Bloomington to Kinnick Stadium. Very hostile environment. One of the best defenses they'll see all year long. I think they're rattled a little bit as Indiana brings in a lot of key new pieces. Guys like Roman Hemby transferring in from Maryland. Guy like Fernando Mendoza at quarterback transferring in from California. I think the Hoosiers struggle just a little bit against this Iowa team, especially in a hostile environment. The Hawkeyes get a massive win on homecoming, I should add. Homecoming game for the Hawkeyes, and they're 3-2. Massive. They needed that. After losing to Iowa State, losing to Rutgers, they could not afford to go 2-3 heading into the bye week. They don't. They're 3-2. Coming out of the bye week, they go on the road to Wisconsin, a team they beat 42-10 last year. This will be the 99th battle for the Heartland Trophy between the Badgers and the Hawkeyes. And Iowa has, in fact, won the last 3 meetings. But after last year's beatdown, Luke Fickell was livid. They have almost dedicated this entire offseason to beating Iowa. Go read up on it. I mean, they did not take that loss, especially as bad as it was, very lightly. And it gives me a lot of faith that Wisconsin's going to come through and win this game. They've got Billy Edwards transferring in at quarterback from Maryland, so maybe better quarterback play than they had last year. 8 starters back on defense that can match Iowa step for step, I believe. Factor in home field advantage as well. It hasn't bothered Iowa before, but I think the stadium's going to be rocking in a make-or-break year for Luke Fickell. He needs to get the Badgers back to the postseason. They beat their rival, again, especially with as much motivation and anger has been built up over the last almost year as they've prepared since that loss to Iowa last year. Wisconsin gets the win. Iowa's 3-3 and naturally falls to 3-4 with a loss to Penn State. I don't know many teams that can beat Penn State this year, but one of them is certainly not Iowa, despite hosting this game at home. Penn State's too good on both sides of the ball. They're not going to win this game with ease, I should say, but they will win it. So through 7 games, Iowa is 3-4. Things are not looking good, especially with a lot of tough teams coming up. I will say, going into their second bye week, they'll be 4-4 because they will beat Minnesota. They own the Golden Gophers, right? 11-2 against Minnesota since 2012. Arguably should be 12-1 had it not been for that controversial fair catch call just a few years ago. While Minnesota is going to have a very good team this year, I mean, underrated team, it's one of those situations where I can't really pick the Golden Gophers to win it. I know they did it 2 years ago, but I really can't pick them to do it considering the history and how much Iowa has dominated. I think they do come through, especially at home, and desperation here. They need to get back to 500. They need to defend their home field, and they do so back to 500 with 4 games left. Coming out of the bye week, needing just 2 wins to get to the postseason, I think they'll lose their next 2. I told you, I thought they'd win one of those massive home games against one of the playoff teams. They do. They beat Indiana. They will not beat Penn State, and they will not beat Oregon. If I had to rank them in order of most likely to least likely, it would be Indiana, Oregon, and then Penn State. So if Iowa wants the chance to pull off a massive upset, Oregon is the best shot they've got. The Ducks lose a lot from last year. We don't know how Dante Moore is going to pan out. We don't know what the wide receivers are going to be like with the loss of Evan Stewart. A lot of losses on both sides for Oregon. Could make it right for an upset, but I just think Dan Lanning is too good. This team is too tough. They're not afraid of playing anybody anywhere. We've seen that time and time again with Lanning at the helm. Oregon, I think as the year goes on, gets better quarterback play. I think the defense gets stronger. And once again, I just don't have faith in Iowa's offense being able to keep up with this team. So they lose this game. They're going to lose to USC because similar logic there, USC's offense, I think, simply going to be too good. Not sure Iowa's offense can keep up. So unless the defense puts the offense in favorable field position or the defense can score some touchdowns of their own, I just don't see them beating the Trojans, who are a much better team than people realize. So at 4-6, golly, when's the last time that happened? They've got to win both games just to get to the postseason if you're Iowa. And I'm going to tell you right now, they'll do just that. They will win both. I think they'll cruise past Michigan State. I know they lost to Michigan State last year, 32-20. They allowed 468 yards of offense, but with their backs against the wall on senior day at Kinnick, I just don't see Kirk Ferentz allowing his team to lose this game. You've got to give your team a chance to fight for the postseason and the season finale. So I do think they're going to find a way to beat Michigan State, who I think is still going to go through still in the mini rebuild mode under Jonathan Smith. And then on the road at Nebraska, similar to the logic with Minnesota, Iowa dominates Nebraska. They have won the last 6 games against the Cornhuskers in Lincoln. They've won 9 of the last 10 overall, including 13-10 last year, 13-10 the year before. Nebraska did win back in 2022, so I know they're capable of doing it. And this is a fantastic Nebraska team, arguably the best that Matt Rule has fielded in his time in Lincoln, but I just can't pick the Cornhuskers get it done despite having home field. Iowa faithful will travel well. Their backs against the wall. The defense shows up and shows out. They forced Dylan Raiola into a handful of mistakes. And while many believe, and many Nebraska fans will believe this is the year, they once again will be disappointed. Iowa finds a way to win and goes back to the postseason. 6-6, 4-5, but does see their streak of seasons with at least 8 wins come to an end. Now, I know a lot of people are going to be livid about this. You don't know Iowa football. You're a clown. You're a joke. All right, maybe so. But again, I just mentioned it. Iowa, the years they've racked up these victories, has not played anybody. They haven't. 24 wins against FBS opponents in the last 3 years. 14 of those 24 wins were against teams that finished with a losing record. Many of the other wins were against teams that barely finished with a winning record. Did you also know that Iowa, the last 3 years, they're 0-7 against ranked teams? 0-7. Losing those games by an average of 25.7 points per game. They're not even competitive against quality opponents. And if you look at the schedule, they could easily face 5 to 7 ranked teams this year. Iowa State will be ranked. Indiana, most likely ranked. Penn State, Oregon, Nebraska, and USC possibly could be ranked. You're looking at least 5 to 7 teams that could be ranked when Iowa faces them, and they have a horrible track record these last 3 years, despite decent records. Horrible track record against good teams. Even so in bowl games. Lost to Missouri last year. Got shut out by Tennessee the year before. They're beating up on weak Big Ten teams. And that's great. A win's a win's a win. But this year's schedule is more difficult than it's been in years past. You could argue they can maybe get to 7-5. I don't see it being much higher than that. 6-6 for Iowa in 2025. Thankful, grateful they can get to the postseason. But I'll continue to say that they're going to need a lot more changes on both sides of the ball to truly become competitive in this expanded and obviously much more competitive Big Ten Conference. So guys, as always, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, share our videos, and check out everything down in the description below. That includes our expert picks over on the gridironexpert.com. Some of the best college football and NFL spread picks in the entire country, beating out over 80% of the national handicappers. You do not want to miss out on that. Do not want to miss out on our weekly newsletters, giving you tons of exclusive content year-round. All of that down in the description over on the gridironexpert.com, where you can become a member of our GE Nation. And once again, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.